Hey, this is the Derpveloper, and in this video we're going to kick off our SQF Basics primer by talking about variables. So what is a variable? A variable is simply a named storage container or a named placeholder for data. After you create this said container, the data stored within it can be read and or modified later. To create a variable, we have to do what's known as initializing it. We initialize variables by first giving them an identifier. An identifier is simply a name given to a variable which is chosen by you, the developer. After that, you assign it a value. So an example could be my variable equals 0. After initializing a variable, it's going to take up space in the computer's memory. And this typically isn't too drastic when you're using smaller variables, but if you're using a large number of very large variables, you want to make sure that you're undefining the ones that you don't need anymore to prevent them from unnecessarily taking up space within the memory. You can destroy these variables as easy as you created them by simply setting the variable's value to nil, which effectively destroys the variable. So an example would be my variable equals nil. That variable is no longer taking up space because it has an undefined value and it's not storing anything. Variables exist in what are known as namespaces, which means they're only visible in certain areas of the game. This is done so that way you prevent naming conflicts across scripts when you're using different kinds of variables. The different namespaces include local, global, and public. In the local namespace, variables are only visible within the specific script that they were created in. This entire script has access to this variable, but other scripts do not. All local variables start with an underscore. So an example, underscore local variable. That variable would only be visible within the script it was created, and only that script would be able to use it. When you're creating local variables within functions, you should mark variables as local using the private command. This is done by typing out the command private, and then within quotation marks, you would type underscore local variable, and then underneath that, or wherever you're initializing the actual variable, you would set its value. More identifiers can be passed to the private command using an array, which is just a list of data types. So you would do that by typing out the private command, and then inside square brackets, you would name each variable within its own set of quotation marks, separated by a comma. The reason you would want to do this is to prevent naming conflicts or prevent accidentally modifying local variables within the script that the function has access to. The global namespace means that variables are visible on the entire machine where they were defined. Mission editor object names are global variables that point to those objects, and they cannot be redefined or modified. So for example, when you create an object within the 3D editor and you give that object a name, that is a global variable that is pointing to that object, and you can access that object using its variable or object name. Global variables must not start with an underscore. For example, global variable equals 0. That variable would be visible across the entire machine where it was created, and any script would be able to use it. The public namespace means that global variables are visible on all machines in the network. This pertains more towards multiplayer and networking type stuff. These variables are never truly public variables, but they emulate their behavior. The value of the variable is broadcasted over the network using the public variable command. The variable will have the same value across all clients. After you modify this variable, it needs to be manually rebroadcasted with the public variable command. Variable scope again refers to the visibility of variables. However, it's referring to the visibility within the script. So it's talking about which parts of the script can see or use them. If you initialize a variable within a control structure, so for example an if statement, a for loop, switch, while, etc., it will only be visible within that structure. So an example would be if alive player then underscore is alive equals true. So we initialized that variable within that control structure. If we tried to use that variable outside of that if statement, it would not work because it is only visible within that control structure. We'll get more into that when we start going over control structures. While we're not going to be going over data types in this video, I did want to mention that variables store different kinds of data types. The kind of value that you store within the variable will specify the type of variable. Variables can be of type int, float, string, boolean, etc. And we'll go over all that when we go into the data types video. Just know that variables can store a wide variety of these data types. that about does it for this video, and I know it was a short one, but I want to take this one step at a time, and I want to make sure that everyone is understanding the information that I'm putting out there. I also want to know if I need to be more thorough, or if I can tone it down a bit and be a little bit quicker in my explanations of things. So please let me know if you want to know more about variables. The the Bohemia Interactive Community Wiki is super helpful and has all sorts of resources in terms of SQF scripting. So again, that about does it. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you on the next line.